Today I want to talk to you about a sensory diet for better stress management. This does not mean a diet of food and drink, but rather a diet that pertains to your senses, the things that you are sensing and experiencing. It's no secret that not all stress is strictly mental. Some of it is also sensory. Think about how you may be affected by loud noises or harsh or too bright lights or strong smells or overpowering smells. All those things are sensory experiences, but they can add to the stress level in your life. These sensory experiences can be actual stressors to you. So while we take great care and put much effort into reducing and eliminating stressors of all kinds in our daily experiences, we should not overlook sensory stressors. There is such a thing as sensory overload. And sensory overload can in itself be that stressor that brings you to feel stressed out, to feel on the edge. Or it can be something that adds to other stressors that you are experiencing and push you to that edge, push you further into feeling stressed out. What are some examples of how you may feel or how these sensory stressors may manifest in your experience? Well, for example, you may find yourself to feel irritable, or maybe like you have some brain fog. You may be experiencing brain fog. You may feel fatigued, or maybe you're unable to concentrate. And while this is not an all-inclusive list, it's a good example of how sensory overload or simply too much of some kind of sensory experience can cause symptoms that are associated with stress, with stressors, with being stressed out. So what about this sensory diet that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode? Again, this has nothing to do with food or drink, but rather what you allow to be part of your sensory experience. If sensory experiences are becoming too much or adding to your sense of stress or feeling stressed out, if sensory experiences turn out to be the stressors that are presented in your life, that you're experiencing in your life, the way to address that is to simply reduce some of those sensory stressors, or ideally eliminate them as much as possible. So if you find yourself in an environment that is noisy or that is loud, your goal would be to reduce that noise, reduce the volume. If you find yourself in an environment where the lights are too bright or too harsh, the goal is to reduce that, reduce the brightness or the harshness of those lights, whether that means permanently or at least for some amount of time, to give your senses a break so that you are not overly exposed or overexposed to these experiences and you are not overloading your senses with them. The other thing to reduce that may not be as easy to identify or as obvious for some are multitasking inputs. When you have too many things going all at once, maybe you have multiple windows open on your computer or multiple tasks that you are actively working on at the same time, going back and forth, switching around, whatever the case may be. That in itself This attempt of multitasking can be an overload to your senses. Essentially, you are going from one thing to the other, looking, feeling, touching, listening, and it can become too much. So let's work on reducing the multitasking sensory input. As we're looking to reduce or replace these sensory experiences that are too much or too harsh, we should aim to replace them with something that is more agreeable, something that is not harsh or too much for our senses. So if we are proposing to reduce or eliminate lights that are harsh or too bright, let's replace that with lights that are softer, that are easier on the eyes. We're not talking about dimming the lights or turning them off to the point where you can't see and you can't do what you need to do. We're simply saying swap out that which is too bright, too harsh, unnecessary to something that is more agreeable to your senses. Same thing with noise and sounds and volume. Aim for a quieter space, whether that means reducing and eliminating all the noise around you, or if you can't do that, at least incorporating some kind of noise canceling technology, some kind of ear protection, something that will reduce that sensory input from your environment. When it comes to the overload of multitasking, you can replace that with focusing on one thing at a time. And although that's not always an option, although it would be ideal, the idea here is to reduce and eliminate as much as possible and replace it with something more agreeable. Whether that means for your entire day or part of your day. Whatever you can get will be helpful. You have to start somewhere. As you reduce inputs that are too harsh, too overwhelming, and replace them with things that are more agreeable, it's also important to take some time to restore your sense of peace and calm. Make sure that throughout the day, you take little breaks, micro breaks of 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be any longer than that, of being still, being quiet, maybe closing your eyes, shutting out the outside world, and focusing within. Maybe you do a little meditation, maybe some breathing exercises. You can choose to gaze out the window. Look at nature. Focus your eyes far away to give them a break from constantly looking at screens in front of you, which is often the experience for people throughout the day, especially at work. You may want to focus on something like texture. That's a good distraction, a good way of getting away from the overwhelm of whatever your other senses may be experiencing. Touch something that is smooth or textured and focus on that in a mindful way as a way of taking a break, giving the rest of your senses a break from that which tends to be overwhelming, which tends to be too much. I invite you to do a little exercise, a little experiment for the next 7 days. Every day, take one thing and reduce it or eliminate it altogether, whichever you can do. Something that is too much on your senses, whether that's light, whether that's noise, whether that's too much multitasking or attempts at multitasking, whatever that may be. Take one thing every day and eliminate or reduce it the best you can. At the same time, start incorporating one new way of gaining or restoring your senses, gaining some peace, gaining some relaxation, those little mini breaks, 2 to 3 minutes, closing your eyes, shutting out the world outside, or gazing into nature, allowing your eyes to look at something off in the distance. So very simple, every single day, add those 2 things into your experience. If you can replace harsh sensory inputs with something more gentle, more agreeable, that's a bonus, that's even better. But see how you feel at the beginning of your 7-day experiment and on day 7 or day 8. You should see a notable reduction in that sensory overload, because if you are proactively working every day to reduce or eliminate something off that list, maybe replace it with something nicer, more agreeable, and work on restoring or replenishing your peace and your calm, you should definitely see an improvement within 7 days or so, and keep it up beyond the 7 days to proactively work on combating those sensory overload experiences and restoring peace, calm, and balance into your life. If you'd like to learn more about a comprehensive approach to stress management, check out the links below.